Hello, friends. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. As you've already heard it, there have been a little bit of shuffling in the world ranking, and Liren has captured back the world number two title, and he's back at world number two. He was there for a short period of time when Alireza took over, and you have seen some tremendous performances from Alireza. But now Ding is back, and well, Alireza is already selected for candidates, but probably after this tournament, Ding Liren is going to be the last player to get selected in the candidates based on the rating system. He's number two at the moment, and he has played some tremendous game in the last few months. So let's have a look at this game, exactly how he played it, and what we can learn from this. I think the one thing you need to pay attention to is going to be control, and we are going to focus more on this thing very soon. So let's just first dive into this position. It was black to play here, of course. So you can see, let's evaluate the position a little bit. White is a pawn up, that's the e3 pawn. Not sure if that's a great pawn, or you can make something out of it. After all, it's a kingside pawn, and as soon as black develops his last piece, that's the rook, he would be fine. So actually, white has a slight advantage, not enough to win probably, but still Ding Liren maintains a slight advantage. Now here's the thing. Black would very much like to play the move rook to d8, get everything together. That's a beautiful position, beautiful centralization. Everything is solid except that there's a problem. The problem is you quickly drop the pawn on a7, and that's why Bai Xingjing played the move pawn to b6. Alright, logical. Now this is where the difference between normal players and players like Ding Liren is. Any player would play the move pawn to. You can see the pawn is hanging obviously. Any player would naturally play the move pawn to a4, just protecting this, and you're a pawn up, and you'll probably try to squeeze something out of this position. I think Magnus Carlsen would play this position happily and squeeze something out of it. But here's the thing. Here is where we discuss about control. So you can see after the pawn to a4, black can actually get rook to d8. You have to leave this beautiful square, and black has absolutely no problems. His pieces are well placed. He can just make a room for his king at 6 or g6, and in both cases he's doing totally fine. He has a very solid position, and as I said, the pawn on e3 is an extra pawn, but will you really be able to monetize it? Not really sure about it. So this is where Ding Liren differs from us, and yeah, let me just take you through this again. This is where he shows his class. He takes control over the position. In fact, the entire game is going to be based on this one principle, control. So let's go back. What did Ding play here? He plays rook to d1. Beautiful move. Again, centralizing a piece, developing a piece, and majorly taking control of the d8 square. It basically means that you can no longer play rook to d8 and get activity. And obviously, now black captured the pawn and the material is equal. You have a majority, obviously that is suppressed majority thanks to a pawn. We are suppressing this majority, but basically the material is equal in this position. So bishop to f3, again this is all about control. We are taking control of the long diagonal, and just pay attention to the bishop on a2. He's going to be stuck over there in Siberia for the rest of his life. So we are attacking the rook. Rook has to move. We have a firm control over the square. Thanks to our queen and rook looking at that square, he has to move to a different square. He goes to c8, and here's another beautiful move. It's a little thing that matter in this position. White's position, because he gave back the pawn on a2, White's position is perfectly harmonized, perfectly coordinated. Everything is beautiful, coordinating with each other, but same cannot be said about black. All these three pieces are isolated, they are different from each other, they are all loose, and the biggest problem is the back rank issue. Let me just highlight that. If one of these pieces, the queen or the rook, moves, there is a back rank checkmate threatened because of our excellent control over the d file, the most important file. Now here's a move that shows the class of Ding Liren. Again, he just stirs the position, disturbs the position with this move, a bishop to b7. So that's the thing. This bishop versus this bishop. Obviously, our bishop is far more active and far more useful, and we have basically disturbed the harmony of black's pieces. We are asking him to make a decision. Obviously, you cannot take this. Hopefully, all of you are well aware of this basic checkmating idea. That's a back rank mate. So obviously you can't take the bishop, you have to move the rook. You can't go to this square, going to this square is useless. So black just plays rook to c5. The idea is after queen d8, you go queen f8 and try to defend. Well, this is all fine, but again you see the problem. You can't really capture on d8 because I'll just capture back and that will be checkmate. So your queen is useless. We'll look at a moment why the rook can't capture on b5. Basically, there are tactics all over the place, and the bishop on a2 is just in Siberia. So we have basically time, and that's what we do. We play h3. We get rid of our back rank issues, and now we are threatening some serious things. Let me just show you an example. Bishop to b3 was played in this position. Now you might ask, what's wrong with the move rook takes b5? Can't this be played? Yes, it can be played, but there's a huge problem with this move. And the idea is bishop to e4. That's a very strong idea. What's the idea behind this? Well, of course, you are threatening to capture the pawn. That's a deflection tactic, and then to capture the queen. He cannot capture our queen. He can play a move like pawn to g6, but then comes queen f6. This is the weakness of the last move, right? Because of the pawn to g6 move, this dark squares are weakened. We take control over them. Our bishop controls the f5 square, so our queen is relatively stable, and the threat of rook d8 is nearly unstoppable. So that's quite a nice position. Alright, so let's go back. In this position, he can't really capture the pawn. He plays bishop to b3. Now we centralize a piece. Here comes g6. Again, we use the weakness of the last move, queen to f6, gaining control over the dark square. This game is all about control. We have control over the d file. We have control over the long diagonal. The bishop is a killer, and the queen takes control over this dark square. Absolutely beautiful. And again, you see rook to f5 being played. Obviously, that was a difference, right? In the last variation, we had a bishop on e4, which was stopping him from putting his rook on f5, but this time it can be done. Black again threatens the queen, but you can see there is a certain disharmony in black's position, and we keep the queen on the same diagonal, threatening the same thing, rook to d8, and that will obviously win the queen. So he needs to deal with that. He plays queen to c5. Now if you give a check, the thing is he just steps up and he's all fine. He's defending, and maybe he has successfully coordinated his pieces. This is where again accuracy is super important. The next two moves are simply brilliant, and uh, I don't really expect anyone to find this move, but here we go. Bishop to e4. The point of this is really deep. First of all, the rook doesn't have too many squares. We are threatening some back rank problems, and okay, in the game he played rook to e5. Now here's something crazy, absolutely crazy move. Maybe I'll just pass on to you, and I'll hand over the position to you. Try to find the move for white. White to play, find the absolutely crushing move. There's only one move that wins here, and that's totally crushing. So give yourself a few seconds, try to crack it. Alright, in case you need more time, you can always pause the video, but I'm gonna go forward. The move is absolutely crazy, and it's very difficult to spot it on the board. Bishop takes on g6. Now what kind of a move is this? Why do we give it up? I mean, this is a free and clear setup. We never give up a bishop like this, but there's a particular idea with this. Let me just show you, of course. The threat is queen at 7, bishop at 7, all kind of things. We have to deal with this, we have to capture. So pawn takes. If h pawn captures, queen's file opens up, and that's why a move like rook d8 is winning. If king g7, you just go there, and that is quite a nice mate. Let's go back. This can be played, but basically this is just beginner stuff. You just capture more and more material. You'll soon pick up the bishop, and everything else completely winning. And that's why the bishop cannot be captured by the rook's pawn. It has to be captured with the bishop's pawn. That's the f pawn. But here comes a very powerful move. Rook to d7. We are just taking control over the 7th rank. Rook on the 7th. This concept you must have heard. Rooks are extremely powerful on the 7th. Specifically because the king is on the 8th and there are pawns on the 7th. And right now we have a big threat. That's to capture here. Followed by checkmate here or here. It's quite a big nasty threat. And pushing the pawn to h5 just creates more weaknesses. Moving the rook away also creates more weaknesses. We just go to f6. or d8, and both are completely winning. In fact, this position is totally winning. So what else can he do? Well, in the game he played bishop f7, closing in the 7th rank, trying to keep everything. Bishop acts like a tall pawn, trying to keep everything close. Unfortunately, because of a move, pawn to g6, we have the right to take control over the dark squares, and that's what we do. Queen f6. Taking control over all the dark squares, and we are threatening a lot of things, of course. First of all, we are threatening the bishop. How do you play this position? If we go queen c1 check, king over here, that's it. Basically, this position, black resigned. Let me just show you some ideas. The biggest threat, of course, is to capture the bishop. So if you try to defend it, the problem is rook goes away. And yet, there are threats like rook going to d8. That's going to be totally crushing. What else can you do? Well, you can go rook f5, trying to defend everything. It doesn't really work because of this. That's a checkmate. So in fact, after this move, king to h2, black is totally busted. He can't defend both the bishop and the rook, pardon me, and the rook, and that is why he basically resigned here. So I'm just going to leave you with this position, and of course this game was all about control. Right from the start, Ding Liren took control over the d file, then the diagonal, then the last squares. It was an absolutely crushing game. So I'm going to leave you with this position on the board, with this beautiful bishop sacrifice. Let me just highlight that. That's tremendous to calculate, of course. So a masterpiece played by Deng Liren, and with this victory, he's up on the ranking. He's world number 2, and he's probably going to be the one to qualify for the FIDE candidates. So we're gonna have a look at more of his games in the future, of course. So until next time, see you guys.